Robert Plank Show, episode 245, Wow Factor Marketing. Stop spraying bullets and use direct response techniques to adapt and thrive with John Dwyer. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the program. We're going to talk today about some wow factor marketing, and the guy to tell us all kinds of interesting stories and tell us about what he's done in business is John Dwyer, and he's known as JD to most, and he is a marketing enigma. He is unique in the field of advertising, and when it comes to creating more sales for businesses, his thinking is refreshingly unconventional, and thank goodness for that, because there are way too many so-called marketing experts out there who simply peddle the same old marketing philosophies. We're going to do all kinds of cutting-edge stuff, talk about all kinds of interesting topics. So, Mr. JD, welcome to the show all the way from Australia.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. And just so that everybody realises that my first name isn't JD, yeah, it's John Dwyer. But ever since I was 10, I got JD or Hey Stupid.
I mean, if you had to choose one of those, then I guess might as well go with the shorter one, right? Easier to say.
I think it's easier to say. It'll be up to your listeners whether or not the second one is more appropriate in about 20 minutes.
I mean, I'm sure that they'll be very nice and kind to you. So cool. So you're the guy to talk to when people want to know that their advertising is actually paying off. You're the guy to talk to when they want to know about new ideas. And so, what's on your mind lately? What do you think that where are people missing the boat now, and what do people need to know these days?
Look, I think, Robert, my philosophy is all about advertising that's measurable, all about marketing that's measurable. And you know how you've heard the story time and time again that, 50% of my advertising dollars is wasted. Well, I don't know, but I don't know which
Which
50%. I
half?
wish I did.
Yeah.
Well, I would probably suggest that maybe 80, 90% of most small and medium-sized businesses' advertising is wasted. And the reason I feel confident in saying that is because I deal with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. And when they come onto my coaching program, I give them a questionnaire and ask them what have they been doing marketing-wise. And I just shake my head. I mean, they've been sponsoring the local little netball teams or soccer teams with their name of their butcher shop or whatever it may be on the back of the jerseys. They've been on the side of buses, they've been on the backs of taxis, they've had a billboard on the freeway. And when I ask them, do any of those things have any measurability to them? Do they know whether or not they're selling anything as a result of that? They shake their head. And guess what they say? They say, but we're getting our brand out there. And I say to them, well, you better tell that to the kids when they sit around the dinner table tonight without any food. Because if you continue to just get your brand out there and you don't have any sales, then I'm afraid you're doing very, very silly things. And so what I do is that I teach them both online and offline just how they can actually create a measurable marketing platform so that they know when they spend money today whether or not that's brought home a return tomorrow.
Awesome. I mean, I think that's a very important thing. And so, why do you think, first of all, why do you think some of these businesses just have these sort of lame methods of advertising? I mean, is it a matter of just like they say, I've got to advertise, I'm not sure where, I'm just going to pick the first thing that I choose? Do you think that like some other advertising companies sort of convinces them? I mean, why is it that all these businesses are putting their money into the wrong things?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things you just said. Number one, they have heard from other, advertising agencies, or they've heard from just, the normal advertising mantra that you've got to get your name out there, that you've got to build your brand, and then they will come. Well, the point is, and a lot of them say, look, build your brand, and then people will taste your product. My view is the exact opposite. Get them to taste your product so they'll fall in love with your brand. So if it was a seafood shop, I would have free calamari samples outside with the hostess at lunchtime and dinner time, and sampling the calamari so that when people had a taste of it, they would come in to the fish shop. And then over a period of time, of course, that brand persona would be ingrained in that particular person's mind. So I flipped the model from building a brand and then hopefully they'll, taste your product, to actually getting them to taste your product. Now, that could be a free download on your homepage of your website, of a free report, all that stuff that I'm sure you know. But the whole idea is to flip that traditional model where you should get your brand out there. I absolutely believe in, brand building. Of course I do. But if you're not McDonald's or Coca-Cola, then chances of you building your brand in your marketplace by just doing that and not actually doing anything else with in terms of a sales focus is very remote. And you know what? The interesting thing is, even the big brand builders, the McDonald's of this world, if I was running McDonald's in America tomorrow, I would sack their marketing manager straight away, because guess what? Today in America, McDonald's will have 27 million people go through their restaurants, and yet they won't have a clue who any one of them are.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting? And you can go to just about any business in the United States today or Australia, and they won't ask for your details. And so, of course, in the online world that we all tend to dabble in these days or live in, we all know that it's crazy to have a dinner party and let everyone come without knowing who was there. And yet there are 72% of all websites in America and Australia have absolutely no data capture facility on their homepage. So that means that they're having people come into their website, they spend all the money on pay-per-click advertising or SEO or whatever it may be to get people into their website, in other words, their business, and yet when they're there, they don't ask for their details. And it's just madness. It's crazy. We had the grand final of the big football codes here in Australia. We get 100,000 people to the grand final, just like you will with the Super Bowl, and they let them 100,000 people come into that game and they don't ask who they are. The ticketing agencies have those details, but the football codes don't. Can you imagine how many supporter merchandise, caps and T-shirts and things like that they could be selling after the game if they knew who came to the game?
Sounds like tons of money left on the table there.
It is, and the reason I've got the inflection in my voice, is because it's just unbelievable. It's crazy. It's madness. The vast majority of businesses, online and offline, don't collect any data, which means that they can never resell to those people.
And it sounds like, I mean, in the case of say like a McDonald's, like maybe they either like lucked out, or maybe they got to where they were just because of these old marketing tactics. But I mean, it's like, I don't know, like if they're not measuring who their customers are, or they're not figuring out what's bringing customers there, it's almost like they could get knocked off that throne at any time and not really know how to get back, or not know how to compete if someone else better than them sort of outcompetes them, it sounds like.
Yeah, Robert. Look, please don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not saying McDonald's are not a good marketer. They're a fantastic marketer, and so too are most of these big businesses that we have brands in our cupboards at home. All I'm saying is that they're not taking it to the next step, whereby you actually collect the contact details of your customers. And because let's face it, if they've come in to buy something off you once, they're a lot easier to sell to than someone who's never been exposed to your business. That's what I'm saying. Look, we have a restaurant here in Melbourne, Australia, who's a client of mine, and it's called the Lobster Cave. So therefore, it's a seafood restaurant. He was spending $500,000 on radio advertising and newspaper advertising when he came on board my coaching program. And he's a bit of a cheeky guy. He's very similar to Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. He's very, very cheeky. And I said to him, look, I can save you $500,000 in the first month of you being part of my coaching program. And of course, he was sarcastic. He said, okay, well, if you think you're that smart, tell me why, tell me how. I said, look, at the moment, you've got a very successful restaurant, and you have BMWs and Mercedes parked outside your restaurant every day. So it's quite an upmarket restaurant. The cheapest meal would be $50. And I said, you're not collecting any of the data of those rich people. How about we stop the $500,000 worth of wastage on, and all he was doing on newspaper and on radio was a jingle on radio saying, come to the Lobster Cave, whatever it was, and the newspaper ads were all branding. I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we actually collect all the names and contact details, and we'll actually incentivize your waiters 50 cents for every contact detail that they get. And that's what happened. Over the next month or two, the waiters would not let you get out of that restaurant without getting your name and your contact details. It was simply just a little contest to win a dinner for six at the end of the month. They just filled in the form, good old-fashioned style, right? And after collecting that data, what happens now is that he walks into his restaurant of an afternoon about 3 o'clock, and he says to his secretary, Cheryl, how many do we have booked tonight out of our 120 seats? She says, 48. He says, okay, send out one of JD's text messages. And what happens is I've put together a series of text messages for him. He'll send one out this afternoon, for example, at 3 o'clock, which will say, hi, Bill and Jim. Look, we really do appreciate your custom. And what we'd like to do is offer you a special lobster tail dinner for two tonight for $68. And his restaurant is booked out 365 nights a week within 15 minutes of sending that text message out.
Awesome. So there was this restaurant that was already successful, but you came in and you applied just a couple of little tweaks, like getting those contact details, having that text blast mechanism in there, and just taking a business that's already doing great and making it even better. And I've noticed that a lot in my own town in America here too. That like some of the local businesses have been getting on Instagram, and they'll follow me on Instagram, and I'm just a regular person and like some of my pictures, and I've seen some of these things where some of the local restaurants will do like these like Facebook contests similar to what you're describing, or some of them will like the pizza places that like the local mom and pop ones will send out text blast right around lunchtime. So I've been slowly starting to see a lot of these techniques that you've mentioned, sort of almost like what would like a struggling or a super small business do? What sort of tactics would they use? And then applying them to these big businesses or these bigger businesses that that need them. And so you're mentioning some of these really cool like concepts like build a list and stuff like that. So is there sort of like a complete system or like a checklist? Like I know you have like the wheel of wow. Is this part of the wheel of wow?
Yeah, look, I'm glad you brought up that good old wheel of where every coach of any persuasion, whether it's a business coach or a marketing coach or life coach, whatever it may be, we've all got these silly little terms, don't we, for our for our systems. And I decided that when I was look, I was in the corporate world, providing my advice to the likes of McDonald's and News Limited and Blockbuster and 7-Eleven and places like that up until about 4 or 5 years ago. And at the latter stage of my career, I said to my wife, look, we've got all this intellectual property and I'm just sort of delivering it to big businesses at the moment. Why don't we see if we can make more money by cutting up that intellectual property into bite-sized pieces and giving it to small businesses? And that's what we've done in the last 4 years. And so what I realized, of course, is that small businesses, when you're running a small business, you're sometimes doing just about everything. And so therefore, let's come up with a name for this system or if you like, a graphic that would be very simple for them to understand, because the last thing I want to do is go to a seminar and someone says to me, we've got a 29-point system. Yeah, oh, just kill me, So it's a 5-point system. And if you can visualize a wheel, because I just put it together in a graphic, it looks like a pizza. And each one of those 5 pieces of that pizza pie represents, if you like, a recommendation from me. And number one, identify your most profitable customer and then look for more people who look like him. That's the very first thing that anyone in business should do. Just identify not your target audience, because that might be women, but you say my most profitable segment are women between 40 and 55 years of age, and they drive a Mercedes and they're on $110,000 a year and they live in these particular zip codes. Then you've drilled down to your most profitable customer, and all you need to do then is just look for more people who look like her. Number 2, create a wow factor to take their eyes off the price. The last thing any one of us want to be doing is marketing our business on price. Unless we were Walmart or one of the $2 shops and we've set up our business specifically for price discounting, what you want to do is make sure that you actually get away from price marketing and take their eyes off the price. And the best example of that would be McDonald's with their Happy Meal product. I've got 6 children and they're 18 plus these days, but at one stage my wife and myself had 6 children under 12, and I think McDonald's got about $6 billion out of us throughout that time because they took our eyes off the price under the free Disney toy. And I was going to ask you, in terms of that, Robert, I mean, I think you would probably have quite a few fast food chains now that are doing a similar sort of Happy Meal to McDonald's, would you?
I mean, I'm sure that other fast food chains they must be doing it, but the only one that really comes to mind is McDonald's.
Yeah, they sort of took ownership of that children's market for many years, and maybe they're sharing it with a bunch of others now, but they certainly have sort of been etched into folklore in terms of that Happy Meal toy. And the third thing is that I tell people is create a problem solution scenario for your marketing. And the weight loss companies do that very well. If you're not happy with your health and you're overweight, go onto my dietary program and you can look like a model within a certain amount of time. So that's called problem solution marketing. And the fourth and one of the most important parts of this 5-step system is fix your website. I'd say that probably 90% of businesses that I come in contact with have got just a woeful website because it doesn't have the ingredients, particularly on the homepage, that it needs to keep people sticky. It doesn't have a welcome video. It doesn't have a big benefit or problem solution headline. It doesn't have video testimonials from people raving about the product or service. It doesn't have any data capture facility, so it doesn't offer anyone a free report if they give their details. So it doesn't have any of these things that keep people sticky. And they wonder why their bounce rate, although a lot of companies don't know what their bounce rate is, but when we actually dig into Google Analytics and we find out that their bounce rate is 75%, they're shocked and they realise then that they're pretty boring. Because if you've got a boring homepage on your website, chances are the bounce rate, which is the percentage of people who come on and just bounce off again, is going to be very high. And that means you've got all the trouble to build this website and all the trouble to drive traffic to it, and nobody stays. They just come onto your website and then bounce. So you've got to know what keeps them sticky on the homepage. And the last thing is repetitive trade. And that is, we all should be looking for creating a loyalty or reward system that stimulates repetitive trade. And your little cafe does this better than most, because they give you that little card when you get 9 coffees, you get the 10th one for free. Even at that very basic level, I have to give them a tick of approval, because they're doing something that most other businesses aren't doing.
Awesome. So lots of stuff in there. And just to sort of recap and make sure that we all understand the wheel of wow, the first step in the wheel of wow is to identify that most profitable customer, and not just stick to men or women, but identify like a specific person who's your absolute best customer, and then find more people like that. Number 2, have that wow factor so that they take their eyes off the price, because none of us really know how much a Happy Meal costs. All we know that it has that kid's toy in it. Number 3, set up a problem solution scenario like the weight loss companies do. Number 4, fix your website and make sure it has all those right ingredients to make things sticky. Have welcome video, headline testimonial, data capture, measure the bounce rate, and then number 5, have that repetitive trade component, so that way you have some kind of loyalty or reward system. And so that's pretty cool, and that's sort of a way, I guess, so everyone can look at their business and run it through the filter. And so out of those 5 things, Mr. JD, is there one out of those 5 that is just like everyone gets this wrong, like most businesses you come across like really need help in specifically one of these 5 areas, or is it all kind of equal?
Yeah, look, I would say that the first tip in those 5 tips is the most important one, because everything else falls over if you don't know who your most profitable customer is. And that's the really crazy thing, Robert. When I'm holding an event, I will ask, the 100 business owners in the room, or 150, whatever it may be, how many of you would recognise that having a good marketing plan, or understanding sales and marketing, would be the most important thing in business, because if you don't have a sale, you don't have a business. And everyone puts their hand up. I say, okay, well, look, in that case, can I just ask a couple of other questions? Who has an accountant? And they all put their hand up. Who has a lawyer? Or, we call them solicitors in Australia. Who has a lawyer? And they all put their hand up. Who has a cleaner that comes in once a week? And they just about all put their hand up. I said, okay, you just told me about 30 seconds ago that having marketing and sales skills are the most important things in business. Who has anybody advising them on marketing or sales? And you can hear the crickets in the background. Hardly anyone puts their hand up. And so the irony is that everyone's going into business, setting up their business and having all of these operational side of the brain procedures all ticked off. But the most important thing is, having marketing and sales skills, and yet hardly any business person has anyone advising them on that. And when I go through my system with them, I highlight to them the most important facet of those 5 points is identifying your most profitable customer, because if you don't, then that means you are spending money just left, right and centre on the wrong things. And, once you identify that most profitable, like in my instance, for example, I know where I have probably the most profits for my business and what sort of businesses they are. I won't bore you with those details now, but they're the companies who I absolutely invite to come to my events or to come to my webinars, because I know they've got a much better chance of conversion. And so that's it, mate. One other thing, if I could just mention to you, Robert, and that is that what I would say comes second. It's very hard to put a second and third place in that 5-step system, because they're all pretty important, but that's collecting data. Don't let anyone ever come to your website or ever come into your shop or ever come in contact with anything you're doing without having some facility to collect their name, their email and their cell number. And the most important one is their cell number. Because as much as that'll come as a surprise to a lot of people, they'll go, oh, what about email? And I know, Robert, that with people abusing the email sort of marketing system, the open rate of emails these days is going south, unless you have a close relationship with a close list. And for that reason, I think it's worth spending the 5 cents and sending out a text message, because guess what? If you send out an email blast to a cold list and you get a double-digit open rate, you're doing pretty well. You send us SMS out to your database and you'll get a 94% open rate within 3 minutes.
Awesome. I mean, really, really good advice and makes a lot of sense. And yeah, like you said, like email seems to be going down and down while people are using their cell phones more and more and using apps and stuff like that more and more. So awesome. Make sure that you know who your audience is and know specifically. That way you can sort of focus on that what that person would want, and you can get more of people like them and then collect that data. And so sort of switching gears a little bit, like just before we got on this call, I hopped on your website, the instituteofwow.com, and I saw that you worked with Jerry Seinfeld. You did your marketing magic with Jerry Seinfeld, and so can you tell us a little bit about that?
I was worried, Robert, that we would get to the end of this interview and you hadn't allowed me to name drop. So, so thanks for bringing that up.
No
Um,
problem. Name drop away.
yeah, look, my friends and family for the last few years, because of that bit of a coup that I had where I got to work with Jerry Seinfeld, they won't hang with me. They're sick of me showing off about it. But look, what it was, mate, is that I had a building society as a client. Let's call them a small bank for the sake of it, here in Australia. And I had sort of suggested a campaign to them a dozen years earlier to take the eyes off the price for people who were looking for home loans. And it was very simple. It was get a home loan from the greater bank and you will get a free vacation. And depending upon how much your home loan was, if you borrowed 400,000 or 500,000, you might go to Fiji or Hawaii. If you borrowed 750,000, you might have gone around the world. So the whole idea was is that we funded this particular giveaway by simply stopping the honeymoon rate. And I'm sure you guys have that in America too, where if you get a home loan at the moment, they'll give you I know interest rates are low at the moment, just pick a number, but let's say you get a home loan for 3% for the next 12 months, and it won't go up to 4% until the 12-month mark. So that 1% break, they call it a honeymoon rate. We gave you honeymoon on the interest rate. Well, I convinced this bank to get rid of that because every bank was doing it. There was nothing unique about that, and put that money into giving them a free vacation. Well, the moment they did it, their home loans doubled within 3 months and tripled within 18 months. It went nuts. Okay, no other bank in the world was giving away a free vacation if you swapped your home loan to them. They had that many people swapping across from the big banks. It wasn't funny. And then once that campaign got to a maturity stage, which was quite a few years in, I decided that we needed a wow factor on top of the wow factor. And so I suggested to the bank that they think about, negotiating with a celebrity, but it had to be one who was very cheeky and just family orientated with great values, but was cheeky. And we put the survey out there, and as it turned out, everyone sort of picked Seinfeld. Just my luck. I was looking for a star that might have been easier to get than Seinfeld. But as it turned out, I just annoyed his office for about 6 months, and eventually, when he said yes, I'll come on board and be the spokesman for the Greater Banks advertising, and I had to fly to New York to meet him for the first time. I said to him, "Why did you say yes to this? Because you've got more money than God. You didn't need the money, and why did you say yes?" And he said, two reasons. Number one, I enjoy Australian sense of humour, and you asked me to be cheeky with the big banks and convince people to bank with the greatest. I thought that would be good fun. And he said, number two, I thought that if I didn't say yes, you'd never go away.
Funny.
So yeah, I had the opportunity for a few years to work with Jerry, and that I'd fly to New York, where he lives, and we would do all of our TV advertisements there. And I've got to tell you that when he became part of the advertising as the spokesperson for the Greater Building Society, which means you're putting a wow factor on top of a wow factor, they tripled their home loan market. Share in the market. So they tripled their share of the home loan market. Within about 18 months of Jerry coming on board, which just goes to show you that you can't necessarily sit back and just rest on your laurels when you think you've got a wow, because there's every chance in the world you can put a wow on top of a wow, which was Jerry on top of the free vacation.
Crazy, and there's so many good things in that story there. I mean, what I like about sort of the positioning of instead of the honeymoon rate, then there's the free vacation is like I mean it's the same amount of money, but just it sort of plays with people's brains a little bit and makes them think like more like the money feels more real because it's like, oh, 3% instead of a 4% is like whatever, but now it's like, well, I have this mortgage and I kind of get this bonus or this thing around the world, and at the same time it almost kind of positions it as like a more like a classier bank or more like upscale because the price is a little higher as opposed to this, slashing the price, this couponing stuff. And I also liked how even after you got them, you were being well, first of all, you got them based on what the customers wanted. So it wasn't just like the stuff that we were sort of making fun of a little bit at the beginning, where people just sort of blast their advertising, whatever, like sponsor the local sports team. You actually asked those customers what they wanted, and you kind of had somewhat of an idea. You had sort of an idea a little bit about what kind of person you wanted. You wanted like the cheeky, the family friendly, but then to really narrow it down, you asked those customers. Like that was pretty cool. And then what also sort of struck me, which was interesting, is that I mean you were being a real marketer, a real salesman, because even after you got him to say yes, you sort of asked him why, so that way you'd know what you're doing right in order to get this huge fine. So I really like that story. I like all the little marketing lessons kind of hidden in there.
I appreciate that, Robert. Thank you very much. And yeah, look, and I think persistence beating intelligence has a lot to do with those sorts of things too. And I know that you've interviewed lots and lots of guests, and entrepreneurs by their very nature get up off the floor and keep going again. So that's not any grand statement that I take ownership of. But yeah, I was quite persistent. I mean, we had correspondents just go over to New York in overnight bags that would FedEx bag, for example, that would get returned because it didn't get to Jerry, and then trying to get through to him is, I think, harder than getting to the Pope, to be honest with you. But we just hung in there, and then eventually I made contact with George Shapiro, who was the guy who discovered Jerry all those years ago, and we hit it off. We just seemed to get on. And yeah, the rest is history. But I'm glad that you highlighted one particular thing there, Robert, and that was transferring the interest rate into something that was a tangible wow factor. And that was another example of taking their eyes off the price. If we just continue to go down the path with, oh, well, look, you get your home loan this at the moment for a honeymoon rate, which is 3%, and it won't go back up to 4% until a year's time, well, guess what? We're back into the Walmart game. We're back into the price discounting. And by taking that away and using that same money, so therefore it was cost neutral to the building society, but it catapulted their loans through the ceiling because they turned that price discounting mentality into a widget, into a free, sort of giveaway. And just on a little sort of, I guess, businesses, what would I say, example of that would be a hairdresser. And I have a number of hair salons come on board. And I say to them, look, if you put a 10% discount sign outside your hair salon, do you think the women would bust the doors down? And they said, no, with Groupon and all these online coupons these days being 50%, that wouldn't happen. I said, good. Well, would you be willing to give up that 10% if I could double or triple your business with a wow factor? And they go, yeah, of course we would. I said, okay, well, next time you're advertising, why don't you advertise for every $50 that a lady spends at your hair salon, you'll give her one cinema point, one picture theatre cinema point. And then when she saves up 6 cinema points, which means she spent 6 times $50, that's $300, you give her 2 $15 tickets to the picture theatre. And you just watch what happens, because when she's got 3 points, she isn't going anywhere else to get her hair done. It doesn't matter what they offer in terms of price discount. She only needs another 3 points to get those 2 theatre tickets. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of creating the wow, rather than putting a sign outside saying 10% off. It'll only cost her 10%, but it will be as powerful, if not more powerful, than a 50% discount.
Awesome. It's like, yeah, it's like the same money but used in that more tangible way. And what's that sort of makes me think in my head as well is if that hairdresser somehow partnered with a movie theater and figured out some sort of two-way situation where, like, if someone, I don't know, if someone like bought enough movie tickets or went to the movies enough times, they got some sort of offer for the hairdresser. I mean, now you're sort of talking. Now you're taking just that unexciting 10% that would have just gone nowhere, and now it's more leverage. Now it's used in other ways.
Absolutely, that's a great idea, Robert. And the only thing is that what I found with trying to convince small business owners to create that sort of win-win relationship with another business is very hard. And I don't. That idea of yours is fantastic, by the way. And for those who are entrepreneurial, then that's absolutely what they should do. But I do come across a lot of business owners who are time poor, so they would probably just go out and buy the 2 picture theatre tickets.
Well, there we go. But lots of possibilities, or lots of ways to get the gears turning. And so, as we're sort of starting to wind down here, in all your travels and all your business consulting and helping people sort of make these little tweaks and have these huge huge boosts in their income and their profits and stuff, are you seeing like a universal mistake that people are making? I know that we talked about like the wheel of wow, but do you just keep seeing like every business you come across, like just they all seem to be missing the point, like in every single situation?
Yeah, two things, and number one, and I know this sounds self-serving because it's what I said right from the very start, and that is spraying bullets and not really targeting their most profitable customer. That's the biggest mistake I see made all the time, where people are just spraying bullets out there, doing brand building advertising on the side of buses and the backs of taxis, and sponsoring the local little netball team and all that sort of stuff, and not focusing in on perhaps, let's face it, if I was an upmarket hair salon, let's pick on those again, then chances are I'd be wanting to target women who are driving a Mercedes and living in the right zip codes and are probably between the ages of 35 and 60, because that's where their biggest income earners would be. And they're not. They're not. They're just putting out a letterbox brochure to the 10,000 homes in all sorts of other suburbs that aren't necessarily representing their highest return customer. So that's number one. And I think the other thing that probably I see over and over again is people going into business based on what they love to do. And I know that when we see the Tonight Show with Jay Leno and Jimmy Kimmel and all these sorts of things, you'll have people get on there who will be big Hollywood stars, and they say, look, I've got a mantra that I want to share with the world. Just do what you love, because they have. They'd be, of course, I'd love to make a movie and make $10 million for not really working that hard too. But the point is, for the rest of us mere mortals, I think people should take a step back and go, look, I know I love stamp collecting, or I know I love, whatever it may be, but is there a business in that? And I hear over and over again all these business sort of, I don't know, so-called experts saying, oh, just get out there and do what you love. Well, sometimes what you love is not a good business idea. So that's what I'd suggest to everyone. Look, my kids are at the age now where they're 18 plus, and I think once they get to around about 25, they ask for my advice. Between 18 and 25, they think I'm a nerd, of course. But when they do get to that age where they ask my advice, if they're very heavily into something and it's not a good business idea, I try to convince them not to do it. Don't necessarily do what you love. Do what's a good business idea.
Awesome, good advice. And I mean, I completely agree, and I completely can relate to that sort of thing where we all have things that we want to do, and some things are just hobbies. Some things are just as a way to fill the time or for the way to make us feel good, but aren't necessarily good money makers. So really good advice there. And then stop spraying bullets. Target figure out who your best customer is and target other people just like him or her. And so I want to make sure that everyone knows all about Mr. JD Dwyer and knows how to find you and how to go to your website. So can you tell us sort of who is a good fit for you, who you want to go and check you out, and how they can do that? Where are all the places to go?
Well, thank you very much. And look, I'll just give you my main website because everything feeds off that, to be honest with you, Robert. So my main website is theinstituteofwow.com. So it's a pretty easy one to remember. Who I guess could benefit from the sort of advice that I give is anyone who is in business or thinking about going into business. And when you go to my website, you'll see there's a whole bunch of digital things that you can download on the homepage of the website. Of course, I have to practice what I preach. There's a opportunity for you to download my Wheel of Wow formula. So we have an ebook that you can download. I am yet to meet too many people who have read an ebook, by the way. We've been through that era in the last 4 or 5 years, Robert, haven't we, whereby marketers like you and I have sort of had lots and lots of ebook downloads, just hoping that somebody reads them, because I don't care what age you are. I think we all have to print them out. Otherwise, it's very seldom that we read them off the computer screen. So I've made this really, really easy. The Wheel of Wow ebook is only half a dozen pages, which means you can print it out and have a coffee and read through it. The people who could benefit from, I guess, the mantra that I provide really are anybody who's going into business. You can be a solopreneur, you can be an established business, but your sales are flatlined. or you can be a big business. Most of the businesses I look after these days are doing somewhere between the hundreds of thousands of dollars in turnover up to probably 20 or 30 million. That seems to be my sweet spot. But of course, not long ago I was dealing with businesses like the Grader, which was a $5.2 billion business, and I was dealing with News Limited, with Rupert Murdoch and McDonald's and 7-Eleven. So I've dealt with the big boys, but most of the companies that come on board my coaching programs these days are doing a few $100,000 up to 20 or 30 mil.
Awesome. Yeah, and it sounds like as we were talking about all these sort of ideas and principles and stuff today, it sounds like everybody needs this sort of thing, no matter what size. We all kind of leave money on the table by not having these tweaks, by either not measuring this kind of thing or not having the good website. And so the instituteofwow.com is the place everyone needs to go, and make sure to print out that Wheel of Wow ebook, because it's not that many pages, like you said. And so thanks for stopping by the show today, John, and sharing your nuggets of wisdom and giving us some, not only some cool stories, but also things that everyone should be using in their businesses. So everyone go to theinstituteofwow.com right now while it's still fresh on your mind. And thanks again, John, for stopping by.
My pleasure, Robert. All the very best.
Hey there, and don't you think that John was a fantastic guest of ours today? Well, to find out what John's more about and to go to his websites and everything else, go to robertplank.com/245 to find the show notes for today's episode.